But baking is a science. Let's be real. Let's be don't. Let's not lie to ourselves, Shivesh. Let's not lie to ourselves. Baking is a science. Hello home bakers, how you doing? I know I'm in the same shares that you've been seeing for like the past couple videos, but I'm trying to get more videos out, so I just decided to just sit one day and film all this stuff. So today we're going to be reviewing another baker which shared some essential baking tips for beginners. His name is Bake with Shivesh. Shivesh, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Please, if I'm not, forgive me. I'm from Nigeria. Our pronunciation sometimes is not really, it. So please forgive me. Bake with Shivesh. He has a really popular YouTube channel with over 600,000 subscribers. Awesome. I love that. Smashing it on YouTube. Please share the algorithm. What's it called? The algorithm hack for us. We need to grow. We need to grow our channel. Please help us. All right, bake with Shivesh. Let's get to it.
The first baking tip to you guys would be to try and understand the ingredients that you're working with and the science of baking. Let's start by talking about baking powder and baking soda, for instance. So baking powder has baking soda plus an acid in it, so it reacts. However, baking soda.
So yeah, what he's saying here is actually really true. I wouldn't say try to understand the ingredients. I would say I think ingredients are ingredients. Butter is butter. Sugar is sugar. Not trying to insinuate any stuff, but I believe that he's talking about the ingredients that can really change stuff. For instance, baking powder and baking soda. Many people don't understand that they are two different things and they do two different things. So they are not easily interchangeable. I made a video a while back, which I would link here or here, about the difference between baking soda and baking powder. If you want a more in-depth explanation into what the difference are, you can watch my video or you can watch his videos as well.
Now let's talk about sugar. I don't like using granulated sugar for my baking because the chunks are too big and they don't always melt in the oven, giving my cake that unwanted crunch. However, I would use this sugar for anything that I'm making on the stove, like a compote or caramel.
Okay, now let's be real. There are different kinds of sugar that you can use. Now, if you're a home baker and you just want to make cake, you don't need to get caster sugar. My own opinion. If you're worried about the crunch of granulated sugar, you can always whip up for instance, if you're making vanilla cake, like whip up the butter and the sugar until it looks so pale that I can't even recognize it. So that crunch feeling would disappear. Like, I've been using granulated sugar like a lot. Like, there were times that when I first started, I was always so concerned about using caster sugar because that was the stuff that they were using. But in Nigeria, caster sugar can be like 1,000, and then granulated sugar can be like 600 or 500. Me, that I don't have money like that, let's be real, I can't be spending 1,000 naira to buy one small caster sugar because I want to follow recipe. Because I want to follow recipe exactly, because some foreign people in all these different places, they have access to it and it's cheap and it's affordable. But in Nigeria, it's not affordable. So please, it's true, there's some recipes that you don't use granulated sugar for, but most times, normal home baker-ish kind of cake, please don't stress. Buy granulated sugar, use it like that. If you're making vanilla, whip it. Any other kind of cake, just use granulated sugar. Don't stress yourself looking for caster sugar because you might not find it. All right.
My next tip to you, and I know you've heard this before, is to make sure all the ingredients that you're using for your recipe are at room temperature, especially the ones that you store in the fridge, like your eggs, butter, and milk.
So a lot of people, for this particular tip, great tip, make sure all your ingredients are room temperature. A lot of people don't, well, some people, I won't say a lot of people, but sometimes it can happen, especially if you're using unsalted butter. If you're using margarine, you don't have any problem. But if you are using, I don't know whether it's only people in the abroad and you know all those places that put their egg inside fridge. But me, I don't put egg inside fridge, and it's still okay. But I don't know, maybe it's just me. Please tell me. But sometimes if you are using like things that you have to refrigerate, like milk, unsalted butter, it's always great to kind of bring it to room temperature. Try not to put cold things inside what you're baking. If you're baking like a vanilla cake and you have butter and sugar, and then you have to put milk, it can separate the mixture. If you are melting chocolate, it can seize the chocolate mixture and make it so difficult that it can make you waste that chocolate, and chocolate can be really expensive. So try and make sure that everything you're using, like he said, great tip, make sure you're using everything you're using is at room temperature.
If your eggs aren't at room temperature, this is what you do. Place your eggs in a bowl and then submerge them in room temperature water. Let them sit like this for 5 to 6 minutes and then they'll be ready to use.
So what he just said here is it really depends on where the weather conditions in your country. There's some countries where once you just remove it out of the fridge after 5-10 minutes, it's already soft, it's already warm. There's some countries that even if you remove it after 2 hours, half a day, it's still cold. So you can use all those you can use this tip for that. But if you're in warmer countries, you don't need to use that tip.
My next tip to you guys is to be very precise with your measurements. I'm not a big fan of the phrase baking is a science because I think it makes baking sound super intimidating, scary and boring. But I can't deny.
But baking is a science. Let's be real. Let's not lie to ourselves, Shivesh. Let's not lie to ourselves. Baking is a science, but it's also something really creative, and it's also something that you can play around with. It doesn't make it sound, I don't think it makes it sound intimidating, but I just think it makes it sound like something you really have to be careful with. And honestly, some people don't care. Some people just want something to eat and something to bake and eat, to feel nice and to boast about. Oh, I made this. Oh wow, it's really nice. Like that's what some people care about. They don't really care about baking is science, baking is art. They also want something to eat. Let's just be honest. Shivesh.
But I can't deny the fact that you need to be very particular about how you're measuring your ingredients. The most accurate way of measuring your ingredients is actually using a weighing scale, but I know for a fact that not a lot of us have access to the measuring scale, which is why I would recommend you get your hands on a good set of measuring cups and measuring spoons.
Now, I love this tip that he's giving. My baking changed when I started using a scale. And that is the reason why I give home bakers all my recipes in grams and not cups, because cup measurements are very easy to, cup measurements are prone to error, so to speak, but you can never go wrong with grams. There's a particular scale that I have been using from before time, like over 8 to 9 years. The thing has been going strong. I still use it till today. I have to change it because it has been misbehaving. But that scale changed my baking. And grams also, measuring things with a scale in grams also helps you to know how to reduce recipes. Now sometimes you don't want like the full recipe, and there's just sometimes where you just want a little to snack on when you're watching Netflix, or to just, something portable that you don't need to stress about, that you don't need to worry about wasting. So yes, critical. Get a scale. It is one of the most essential baking equipments that you as a home baker needs. If it's difficult to find, order it online. Like, order it online. Find a way to get it. A scale, whether it's a digital scale or an olden day kind of scale, any type of scale. But if you can't still get a scale, get good cup measurements. There are many cup measurements, measuring equipments that don't give you the exact measurements that it says. So sometimes if you really calculate it, if you really check, and you say, okay, half a cup of something, coffee, half a cup of something, and you check online, half a cup of something, maybe flour is like 120 grams, and then you take a cup. Even the way you measure, use the cup measurement is so. I think maybe I should do a video about how to measure things correctly with cups and scales, because the way you even put the flour into the cup measurement is important, because it might look so trivial, it might look so, this guy, you're exaggerating it. That's why I said, Shivesh, you can't say that it feels intimidating because of the fact that baking is a science. Like, you need to be exact, you need to be precise, and the way that you put ingredients into a cup measurement itself is also vital, because there are ways you put it that you might not know is giving you more than you need. And if you verify that with gram measurements, you will find out that it can be more, it can be less. So please, if you're buying, and if you want to see that video how to measure stuff correctly, because this might be just the reason why your baked goods never come out the way they should be. Maybe you're adding too less of something or too much of something because of the way you're measuring it. So if you want to see that video, please let me know in the comment section below. So yeah, great tip, get a scale. If you can't find the scale, get cup measurements, get good teaspoon measurements, and just have fun.
Now let's see what's the best way of using these. Whenever you're using a measuring cup to measure your ingredients, use a spoon to transfer the ingredient into your cup, and then use the back of the spoon to level it.
So I like this guy's channel. Go and follow him. Follow his channel. That is, I've never seen, like, there are very few people that have seen that have given this tip on how to really measure flour, how to really measure stuff. That is vital, and that's the way you measure things in cups.
My next tip to you guys is to always prep your pan correctly. I know there's nothing more disappointing than a cake that gets stuck and doesn't come out of your pan. Always use a pastry brush or your fingers to brush your pan generously with butter or vegetable oil. Whenever you're prepping your pans for baking, parchment is your best friend, and make sure that you get your cake out smoothly every single time.
The thing here is that not everybody has access to parchment paper. Yeah, that's the thing. Not everybody has access to parchment paper. So if you don't have access to parchment paper, one thing I also do is to use butter and flour, because sometimes parchment paper is quite difficult to come across and sometimes quite expensive. Like, I don't need to spend 2,000 naira to buy parchment paper. Like, that in dollars is like
2 hours later.
That's like $4 for one roll of parchment paper that won't last long. So use butter and flour if you can't find parchment paper. Yes, it might give you that what's it called, that film like floury sides that you might not like, but it's better than your cake becoming a mess and you've wasted money and you can't show your friends. Like, or you can't show your friends what you made, because it's destroyed. So use, if you can't find parchment paper, use butter and flour instead.
Whenever you're baking with eggs, always add them one at a time. If you add all the eggs together, you run the risk of splitting the batter. So always add one egg, mix it really well before you add the next.
Well, you know, there's sometimes where you just make error and you want to add one and then you add two. It really doesn't matter. Like, and see, you said that baking is a Shivesh. When you said baking is looks intimidating, it just makes people kind of paranoid that, oh, I'll make mistake adding 2 eggs when I'm supposed 2 eggs. I'll just make mistake. Oh wow, it's turned out bad. There's sometimes when you make mistakes and you add, instead of adding like 1, you mistakenly add 2. Like, it's okay. Like, if it's split, put flour, it's come together, finish. No big deal. Like, but one thing that he doesn't mention is, if you want to do this, if you really want to do this, crack your eggs one at a time and add, because sometimes you get a bad egg and then just ruins everything and then you waste money. So if you really want to do this 1 egg at a time stuff, crack your eggs into a different bowl one at a time and then add it. Not adding all your eggs into one bowl and then add it one at a time. So yeah, that's my tip for you.
Now moving on to the most important tip that I can share with you. Never overmix while you're combining your dry and your wet ingredients. I think this is one mistake that I made for the longest time when I started baking, because I thought the more that I mix the batter, the better the cake would be. And honestly, it's just so much fun to keep mixing it, right? But
if you are mixing it by hand, it's not fun though. Like, have you mixed icing with hand? I've done it before. It's not fun. It's not interesting. It's only if you're using stand mixer that it looks interesting, but you know, it's not interesting. But what he actually says here is actually what he says here is actually really true. Like, try not to. You can mix as much as you want if you've not added the flour, but once you add the flour, stop. Once you've added the flour and once you've mixed it together, after a couple seconds, stop and whisk it by hand. It would really help you have a much, you know, have a better cake texture. What's texture? Texture. To help you have a great cake texture, and it will just help it from becoming tough after it bakes.
And the best way to combine your wet and your dry ingredients at this stage is to just gently cut and fold. Use a spatula to cut in the middle of the mixture, scrape the bottom and gently bring it to the top, and continue this slowly until everything is well combined.
Well, this particular technique that he's giving here is mostly for cakes that use whipped egg whites. If you're just making a vanilla cake, making a chocolate cake or red velvet cake or a coconut cake, and it doesn't have whipped egg whites, I don't think it's necessary. I don't even think you need to start off with your hand. If you're using a stand mixer, if you're using an electric mixer by hand, you can start with that and then finish off with a spatula or with a whisk by hand. But if you're not making anything with whipped egg whites, that really needs you not to knock off all the air, then this particular tip is vital. But for just normal cakes, I don't think this is absolutely necessary, because this takes time. This takes time, and not everybody wants to spend a lot of time in the kitchen. Yeah.
Another thing to remember is to always preheat your oven. Time and temperature affect the texture and flavor of baked goods, and starting in a cold oven affects both of these variables. But don't keep opening the oven door, because every time you do that, you disturb the baking process. Exactly.
And I feel that this is the reason why a lot of people the cakes that people make don't rise properly. You are probably opening the oven too much. When I put cakes in the oven, I make sure I leave it to rise. I leave it for the baking powder and the baking soda to really activate and help the cake rise. Another reason why some people's cakes don't rise effectively is maybe because you are using expired or aerated baking powder and baking soda. So if your cakes are not rising properly, check your baking powder, check your baking soda. It may have just lost its flavor, it may have just lost its fervor, it may have just lost its oomph. And maybe that's the reason why your cakes are not rising properly. Apart from that, you're probably opening the oven door too much. So once you put cakes in the oven, leave it. Once you see that it has risen to a particular point, you can now begin to check and then to see if it's done or if it's not. Alright, so that's it. So Shivesh, awesome tips, awesome. I love the fact that you gave tips that not a lot of YouTubers give, measuring, about things about measuring, things about measuring. That's like the one that busted my head. Thank you, Shivesh, for giving awesome tips, and I feel that from this video that you guys should watch his content. So far, he has given good tips that I can vouch for. So if you like this video, if you love this video, support my channel. Please support my channel by clicking the like button and click the subscribe button, and don't forget to click the bell button, because that simply means you don't miss any video that I post. I always try to make my videos as informative and as interesting as possible. And if you're not following me on Instagram, please follow me on Instagram at CakeDaddyNG on Instagram as well. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Cake Daddy, Buff Daddy out. Bye guys. Okay, like if it's please put flour, it's come together, finish. No big deal. Like it's just, I don't know.